A lone knight rides through a desolate landscape on an impossible mission. This iconic image has haunted our imagination for centuries, all because of one sacred object, the Holy Grail. By the end of this journey, you will know the 30 legendary quests that define this eternal mystery. We will explore why a simple cup became a symbol of divine grace, and why the purest knight could fail where the most flawed could glimpse salvation. What is the one quest that still calls to you from the mists of legend? The first true Grail quest begins not with a perfect hero, but with a boy raised in the wilderness, ignorant of the world of knights and chivalry. This is Perceval, whose story was penned by the poet Chrétien de Troyes. His tale, Perceval, the story of the Grail, is where the legend as we know it truly takes shape. Perceval's journey is one of heartbreaking potential, a story where success hinges not on strength of arms, but on the simple courage to ask a question. After stumbling through his early knighthood with a mix of raw talent and profound naivete, he finds himself at a mysterious castle, the home of the wounded Fisher King. There in the great hall, he witnesses a solemn, silent procession. A young man carries a bleeding lance, others follow with golden candelabras, then comes a maiden holding a grail, a vessel of such pure gold and light that it outshines all the candles in the room. Perceval watches in awe, but he remains silent. He has been taught that a polite knight does not pry. He sees the grail pass before him not once, but twice, and still he says nothing. He fails to ask the one question burning in his heart, the question that would have healed the king and his barren lands, the question that would have revealed the Grail's secrets. What ails you, my lord? His innocence, which once protected him, becomes his ultimate undoing. He goes to bed, and in the morning, the castle is empty, a phantom place vanished into the mist. He has had his chance, and his silence has shattered it. The Grail was right there, within his sight, yet his failure to speak, to show compassion through curiosity, locked it away forever. This first quest establishes the Grail not as a prize to be won in battle, but as a test of the heart, a lesson that would echo through every knight's story to come. Yet where Perceval's innocence failed, another knight's purity would succeed beyond all imagining. The legend of the Grail needed a hero who was not just good, but perfect, a soul without a single stain of sin. That knight was Sir Galahad. His arrival at Camelot was foretold by prophecy and marked by a miracle. For generations, one seat at the Round Table remained empty, a place of deadly enchantment known as the Siege Perilous. Any knight unworthy enough to sit in that chair would be instantly swallowed by the earth. It stood as a silent challenge, a void at the heart of Arthur's court. Then one day a young knight, clad in red armor and guided by a mysterious hand, entered the hall. He walked directly to the empty seat, and where others would have met their doom, he sat without fear. The letters of his name, Galahad, magically appeared upon the stone, proving he was the chosen one, the knight destined for the Grail. His presence alone transformed the quest. While Lancelot was burdened by his forbidden love for Guinevere and Perceval by his lingering naivete, Galahad was a vessel of pure grace. He did not need to learn chivalry, he embodied it. His quest was less a struggle and more a divine procession. He was the only knight who could heal the maimed king by simply asking the correct question, and he was the one who would ultimately gaze into the Grail's deepest mysteries. In the final moments of his quest, he did not merely find the sacred vessel, he became one with it. It is said that he was taken up to heaven by a host of angels, the Grail ascending with him, forever removed from a world that was no longer worthy. Galahad's story answers the question of what it would take for a mortal to fully achieve the divine, but it also leaves us wondering, is perfection the only path, or is there room for redemption in the Grail's elusive light? But the Grail quest was not a journey for saints alone. Where Galahad walked in a state of grace, another knight had to fight for every inch of his spiritual ground. This was Sir Bors, a warrior of unwavering loyalty and stark practicality. He was chosen to accompany the flawless Galahad, not because he was perfect, but because he was steadfast. His quest would be a brutal series of moral trials, a constant battle between the heart's earthly attachments and the soul's divine calling. The most defining of these tests came when he was forced to make an impossible choice. From a high cliff, he witnessed a terrifying scene. A knight was abducting a young maiden, and at the same moment, he saw his own brother, Sir Lionel, being brutally beaten and dragged away by two other knights. He could only save one. To rescue the maiden was a sacred act of chivalry, a direct service to innocence. To save his brother was a bond of blood, a loyalty that defined his very world. There was no time to weigh the consequences, only to act. In that agonizing moment, Bors made his choice. He turned his horse toward the maiden, trusting his brother to God's mercy. It was a decision that tore him apart, but it proved his understanding of the Grail's true demand. The quest required a love that transcended even family, a commitment to a higher, selfless good. This was the harsh reality of the Grail path. It was not always about mystical visions or angelic hosts, but about the difficult, everyday choices that reveal the content of a knight's character. Bors succeeded not through miraculous power, but through his unshakable, if sorrowful, obedience to a code greater than himself. His journey reminds us that the Grail was not merely for the pure, but for the resolutely faithful, for those who proved their worth not in a single glorious moment, but through a relentless series of painful, correct decisions. Yet for every knight who succeeded through purity or resolve, another was condemned to fail by the very passion that made him great. Sir Lancelot, the finest warrior of the Round Table, possessed a strength and skill unmatched by any man, but his heart belonged to another man's wife. His love for Queen Guinevere was both his glory and his curse, a sin that placed the Grail forever behind a shimmering veil. His quest began like the others, a sacred oath to seek the divine vessel. But where Galahad's path was illuminated by celestial light, Lancelot's was shrouded in a spiritual fog. He wandered for months, lost and disoriented, his prayers feeling hollow and unanswered. He was operating on sheer will, his martial prowess utterly useless in this ethereal landscape. Then, one day, he stumbled upon a mysterious castle, a place of profound silence. He entered a chamber, and there it was, the Holy Grail, covered by a cloth and glowing with an unearthly radiance. A procession of priests stood around it, but as Lancelot moved closer, a voice like thunder shook the room. It was a divine command, forbidding him to approach further. He had come so close, the object of all his striving was right before him, yet he was struck down by an invisible force. He fell into a trance that lasted for 24 days, a living death that mirrored his spiritual state. When he awoke, he was told the bitter truth. He had been allowed to see the Grail, but only from a distance, only through a veil, because of the great sin that burdened his soul. He was the knight who had everything, yet in the one moment that truly mattered, he had nothing to offer. His story is the ultimate tragedy of being so close, yet spiritually too far. The Grail was not a physical object to be claimed by the strongest arm, but a state of grace that required the purest heart. Lancelot's failure asks us a painful question: what good is all the worldly glory in the world if your soul is not ready to receive a true miracle? Long before knights rode in search of a sacred cup, the people of the British Isles told tales of magical cauldrons. These were not vessels of Christian communion, but primal symbols of life, death, and endless abundance from the Celtic world. The most famous was the Cauldron of the Dagda, a chief among the gods. This was no simple cooking pot. It was a bottomless source of nourishment, a vessel from which no company ever left unsatisfied. Other cauldrons held even darker powers, like the Cauldron of Rebirth, into which slain warriors could be cast to emerge alive once more, though forever stripped of their speech. These ancient artifacts provided the raw material for the Grail legend, transforming a pagan symbol of earthly cycles into a Christian relic of divine grace. The cauldron represented community and the unending cycle of the seasons, while the Grail promised individual salvation and a direct connection to God. Yet the core mystery remained the same, a magical vessel that could restore life and heal a wounded world, but a vessel of healing is meaningless without someone to heal. This brings us to the haunting figure at the very center of the Grail castle, the maimed king, often called the Fisher King. He is a ruler suffering from a terrible wound, typically in his thigh, that leaves him unable to stand or rule. His personal anguish is mirrored perfectly in his kingdom, which falls into a state of desolation known as the Wasteland. The fields lie barren, the rivers run dry, and the people live in sorrow. This is no mere coincidence. The king and his land are one, bound by a sacred connection. His physical and spiritual sickness manifests as a blight upon the entire realm. He spends his days in a small boat, fishing on a river near his castle, a passive figure waiting for a cure that only an outside hero can bring. His only solace is the Grail, which sustains his life but cannot heal his wound. The entire quest hinges on this symbiotic tragedy. A knight must arrive at the castle, witness the Grail procession, and ask the crucial question that demonstrates both compassion and understanding. "What ails you, my lord?" That simple, empathetic inquiry is the key. It acknowledges the king's suffering and, in doing so, breaks the enchantment. The king is healed, the land bursts back into life, and the curse of the Wasteland is lifted. The Grail, therefore, is not a trophy to be possessed, but a catalyst for a restoration that requires both a divine object and a human act of profound connection. Why do you think this archetype of a wounded ruler and a dying land resonates so deeply, even today, speaking to a universal fear of brokenness and a longing for a single question that could make everything whole again? Yet another version of the legend transformed the sacred cup into something entirely unexpected. In the German epic Perceval, written by Wolfram von Eschenbach, the Grail is not a chalice at all, but a stone. He called it the lapsid exilis, a jewel of unimaginable power that fell from heaven. This Grail stone is protected not in a single castle, but by an entire order of chivalric monks known as the Templisen, knights who live in service to its divine mystery. The story follows our familiar hero, here named Perceval, on a journey that mirrors the one we know, yet deepens its emotional core. He begins as a fool, a boy so sheltered by his mother that he does not even know the name of God. His early attempts at knighthood are clumsy and misguided, driven by a childish understanding of honor. His first failure at the Grail castle is devastating. He sees the suffering Grail king, Anfortas, and witnesses the magnificent procession of the stone, but he remains trapped in his learned silence. He fails to ask the question. But where the earlier Perceval simply rides away in shame, Wolfram's Perceval embarks on a long and arduous path of true growth. He learns through bitter experience and heartfelt counsel, most importantly from the wise hermit Trevisant. He discovers that his failure was not a breach of etiquette, but a failure of compassion. He was so focused on the rules of knighthood that he forgot its very heart, the shared humanity that demands we acknowledge another's pain. Years later, humbled and enlightened, a divine force guides him back to the Grail castle. The scene is the same, the wounded Anfortas on his litter, the Grail stone glowing in the hall. This time, Perceval's heart overflows with empathy. He looks upon the king's endless torment and, without a thought for rules or rituals, He asks the question that springs from his very soul. "Uncle, what troubles you?" That single, heartfelt inquiry shatters the curse. The moment he voices his compassion, the wound of Anfortas is healed. The stone itself chooses Perceval, not for his purity like Galahad, but for his hard-won wisdom and his capacity for love. He does not just heal the king, he becomes the new Grail king, the guardian of the stone and the leader of the Templars. His quest proves that the Grail is not a reward for flawless virtue, but a gift bestowed upon one who has truly learned how to feel for others. What does it say that the most enduring versions of this story are not about perfection, but about the profound power of a simple, caring question, but the Grail needed a history, a sacred lineage to elevate it from a magical object to a divine one. This transformation was accomplished by connecting the cup directly to the most pivotal moment in the Christian story, the Last Supper. This vessel, now called the Sangreal, or Holy Grail, was said to be the very chalice from which Jesus Christ drank, establishing a new covenant with his disciples. Its earthly guardian was a wealthy and righteous man, Joseph of Arimathea. After the crucifixion, it was Joseph who provided his own tomb for the body of Christ. According to the legend, he also took possession of the sacred cup, and within it, he carefully collected a few precious drops of the holy blood spilled at the cross. This single act fused the vessel with the essence of the divine, forever linking the cup of the Last Supper with the blood of the crucifixion. Joseph was not allowed to rest, however. Persecuted for his faith, he was imprisoned in a Jerusalem dungeon, left to starve, yet the Grail sustained him, providing heavenly nourishment for years, a clear echo of those ancient, life-giving cauldrons. Upon his release, he gathered a band of followers and began an epic journey, carrying the Sangreal across the sea, guided by divine providence, until he finally reached the misty shores of Britain. There, at Glastonbury, he thrust his staff into the ground, where it miraculously burst into leaf and bloom, becoming the Holy Thorn Tree. He founded the first Christian church in all of Britain, and beneath it, he buried the Grail for safekeeping. This journey from the heart of Jerusalem to the wilds of Britain fundamentally changed the nature of the quest. It was no longer just a test of knightly virtue or a search for a magical talisman. It became a spiritual pilgrimage, a sacred hunt for a physical piece of divinity itself. The Knights of the Round Table were not merely adventurers, they were participants in a holy mission to rediscover a lost fragment of their faith, a relic that could redeem a fallen world. How does the knowledge that a legendary object has a tangible, sacred history change the very nature of the search, turning a journey across land into a journey back through time toward a moment of ultimate grace? This elusive nature of the Grail reveals its deepest truth, that it was never truly a cup to be found, but a state of grace to be received. Its power does not lie in its material form, whether stone or chalice, but in what it represents, a direct conduit to the divine, an unearned gift from God that can neither be seized by force nor demanded by right. Think of the knights who failed in their quests. The strongest warrior, Lancelot, was struck down by an invisible force when he came too close. The most earnest seeker, Perceval, saw the Grail pass before him and lost it through a failure of heart. Their stories teach the same lesson, that the Grail cannot be conquered, it can only be bestowed upon a soul prepared to accept it. This is why purity, in the form of Galahad, was the only key. His will was so perfectly aligned with divine will that he did not need to search, he was led. The quest, then, is a metaphor for the soul's own journey. The desolate wasteland is not just a kingdom, it is the inner emptiness of a life without spiritual meaning. The wounded king is our own fractured spirit, yearning for a healing that we cannot provide for ourselves. And the Grail is that sudden, unexpected moment of grace that floods into our lives, mending what was broken and making the barren places fertile once more. It arrives not when we have fought our way to it, but when we have humbled ourselves enough to be open to its arrival. So the next time you hear of a knight's quest for the Holy Grail, remember, it is not a treasure map he follows, but a path of inward transformation. The real challenge was never to find a sacred object hidden in a castle, but to become the kind of person to whom that sacred object would willingly reveal itself. What does it say about our own deepest longings that our greatest legends are not about claiming power, but about preparing our hearts to be worthy of a gift? The Grail's mystery extends far beyond the halls of Camelot, finding a surprising home in the secretive laboratories of the alchemists. For these medieval seekers, the quest for the Holy Grail was not a literal journey across Britain, but a powerful allegory for their own sacred mission, the great work. This was the ultimate process of transmutation, the long and difficult path of turning base lead into spiritual gold. In this symbolic landscape, the Fisher King's festering wound is the primal state of raw, unrefined matter, chaotic and imperfect. His suffering kingdom, the Wasteland, mirrors the initial state of the alchemist's own soul, a barren inner world in need of redemption. The quest itself becomes the meticulous series of chemical and spiritual operations, the dissolution and purification, the death and rebirth that the alchemist must perform. Each trial a knight faces on the road to the Grail Castle is an allegory for a stage in this profound inner transformation. The bleeding lance that Perceval sees in the procession is not just a weapon, it is the raw, masculine energy of the universe, unrefined and volatile, just as the Grail itself represents the receptive, feminine vessel of creation. The ultimate goal of the alchemist was the Philosopher's Stone, a substance said to grant eternal life and turn any metal to gold, but this was never just about physical chemistry. The stone was a symbol of the fully realized and perfected soul, the state of enlightenment achieved when all inner impurities had been burned away. In this light, the moment the knight asks the healing question is the final stage of the alchemical process, when the disparate elements are united and the stone is born. The Grail, therefore, is the Philosopher's Stone. It is the divine consciousness that heals the fractured self and restores the world. When Galahad gazes into the Grail's depths and ascends to heaven, he is achieving the alchemical ideal, his base human nature fully transmuted into a perfect, spiritualized form. This interpretation reveals the quest as an internal, deeply personal journey that anyone can undertake. The castle is not made of stone, but of your own being, and the wounded king waiting for your compassion is a part of your own soul. If the Grail is not a thing to be found, but a state of being to be achieved, what alchemical processes are we each undergoing in our own lives, and what part of ourselves is the Fisher King, silently waiting for the one question that will set it free? This French romance, the Quest del Saint Graal, sharpens the legend into a blade of divine judgment. Here, the Grail is not a magical symbol, but a profound Christian mystery, a celestial object that actively tests the souls of those who seek it. The narrative presents a stark spiritual hierarchy where the failures of great knights like Lancelot and Perceval are not mere misfortunes, but clear demonstrations of their spiritual inadequacy. The story begins after the Grail appears in a blinding ray of light at Arthur's court, compelling every knight to swear the sacred oath of the quest. Yet from the outset, it is made clear that this is a journey from which most will return empty-handed and ashamed. Lancelot, for all his martial renown, is repeatedly humiliated. In one poignant vision, he sees a sick knight healed by the Grail's mere presence, but when Lancelot tries to approach, he is again struck down, paralyzed by his own unworthiness. He is told in a dream that his love for Guinevere is a form of spiritual adultery, a barrier between him and God that he cannot cross. His strength is useless, his reputation meaningless. Similarly, Perceval, who in other tales earns a second chance, is here tormented by demons who exploit his lingering pride. He is shown a false Grail castle and must learn the hard way that his own will is not enough. The quest systematically dismantles the very idea of chivalric glory, arguing that worldly honor is a distraction from true grace. In this world, the Grail is a reward for a state of being, not an accomplishment. It appears to the virtuous in their moments of deepest need, providing spiritual sustenance, while remaining invisible or hostile to those burdened by sin. The quest becomes a brutal filter, separating the perfectly pure from the merely good. This version leaves no room for redemption through effort. It presents a chilling and absolute standard, suggesting that the divine is not something to be found through adventure, but only revealed to those who are already, in their essence, saints. Does this uncompromising vision of the quest make the Grail more sacred, or does it place it forever beyond the reach of a flawed and human world? The Grail's sanctuary was never left unguarded. While knights quested across the land, a hidden lineage of keepers watched over the sacred vessel, a solemn duty passed from one generation to the next. These were the Fisher Kings, a title shrouded in sorrow. The king was not merely a guardian, he was a prisoner of his own wound, bound to the Grail as both its custodian and its victim. His physical suffering, often a wound in the thigh representing a flaw in his vitality or lineage, was the price of his proximity to the divine. He could not leave his castle, his kingdom lay in waste around him, yet he alone was entrusted with the vessel that sustained his life. This guardianship was a paradox, a sacred burden that isolated him from the very world the Grail was meant to heal. His only pastime, fishing in the river beside his castle, was a powerful symbol of this role. As a fisherman, he was a provider of sustenance, just as the Grail provided spiritual food, yet he was also a figure of immense patience, casting his line into the waters of time, waiting for the one knight who could break his curse and free him from his endless vigil. Alongside the wounded king moved the ethereal figures of the Grail maidens. These women, often of noble and pure blood, were the only ones permitted to handle the vessel directly. They carried it in the silent processions that so captivated Perceval, their presence a necessary balance to the king's masculine suffering. In some tales, they are the daughters or nieces of the Fisher King, their own purity a reflection of the Grail's sanctity. They were not passive bearers, but active participants in the mystery. Their role emphasized that the Grail's power was not solely martial or kingly, but required a receptive, nurturing energy to be fully manifested. The most famous of these, the Grail bearer herself, sometimes called the Grail Princess, held the ultimate key. It was often she who would present the vessel to the worthy knight, her action signifying the moment of divine acceptance. The guardianship was a complete system, a broken king and a whole maiden, together preserving a mystery that neither could fully enact without the arrival of an outsider. This sacred duty was confined to a place that existed just beyond the edges of any map, the Grail Castle itself. Known by many names, Corbenic or Montsalvat, it was less a fixed location of stone and mortar and more a state of grace made visible. It was a castle of echoes and illusions, often described as floating between worlds, visible only to those it chose to admit. Lancelot, in his sin, could only wander its periphery, glimpsing its wonders from a spiritual distance. The castle was the physical manifestation of the guardianship, a hidden heart beating at the center of the Wasteland. Its halls were filled with enchantments and tests, its very architecture designed to shield the Grail from the unworthy. To be born into this lineage was to be born into a gilded cage, a life of immense spiritual privilege and profound personal agony. The Fisher King knew the Grail's comfort, but he also knew its terrible cost, a life of endless waiting for a salvation he could not grant himself. What does it mean that the protection of the world's greatest hope rested not on a throne of power, but on a throne of pain? and that its final liberation depended on a single, compassionate question from a stranger. The kingdom's decay was a perfect mirror of its ruler's pain. This is the Wasteland, a realm where rivers run dry, crops refuse to grow, and a profound silence smothers the songs of its people. It is not a punishment from an angry god, but a direct reflection of the Fisher King's own incurable wound. His spiritual sickness and physical agony bleed out into the very soil, turning a once vibrant land into a shadow of itself. The connection is absolute, a sacred bond between the sovereign and his domain. When the king is whole, the land flourishes. When he suffers, the world around him withers. This is why the Grail quest is so much more than a personal test for a knight. It is an ecological and spiritual rescue mission for an entire civilization. The quest's success is measured not in the finding of a cup, but in the sound of water returning to a barren riverbed. The moment a worthy knight, like Galahad or the enlightened Perceval, finally asks the healing question, a miraculous chain reaction begins. The king's wound closes, his strength returns, and as he rises from his sick, the land itself stirs from its long slumber. Almost instantly, the gray skies break, and a life-giving rain begins to fall. Seeds that lay dormant for years suddenly sprout through the cracked earth. The forests grow green again, and the rivers flow with clear, fresh water. The restoration is both immediate and total, a visible sign of an invisible grace. This powerful symbol speaks to a universal truth, that the health of a leader and the health of the land are inextricably linked. It suggests that a society cannot thrive when its heart is wounded, when its guiding spirit is trapped in a state of perpetual suffering. The end of the Wasteland is the ultimate proof that the Grail's power is real, a transformative force that heals not just one man, but an entire world through him. Why does this image of a dying land healed by a single act of compassion feel so deeply satisfying, as if it answers a longing we all share for a world made whole again? Yet for every Galahad who found grace, a dozen knights of the Round Table rode out and returned broken, their quests ending not in glory but in sobering lessons. Sir Gawain, renowned for his courage and courtesy, failed for a reason that strikes at the very core of chivalry, his own unchecked pride. He swore a hasty oath to pursue the Grail without rest, vowing to never sleep twice in the same bed. On the surface, this sounds like heroic determination, but it was really an act of spiritual arrogance. He was trusting in his own endurance and willpower, rushing headlong from one adventure to the next without ever pausing for prayer or reflection. The Grail, which requires humility and stillness, consistently eluded him. He mistook relentless motion for progress, and his pride in his own knighthood became a wall between him and the divine. Then there was Sir Lionel, a knight consumed by a fiery and unforgiving wrath. When his own brother, Bors, was forced to choose between saving him or a maiden, Lionel could not see the higher principle at work. He saw only betrayal. Later, when he encountered Bors again, his rage was so absolute that he attacked his own flesh and blood, attempting to kill him in a blind fury. He was only stopped by a miraculous intervention from heaven. His failure teaches that the Grail cannot abide a heart poisoned by vengeance, even when the anger feels justified. A knight who cannot forgive his own brother has no place at the table of divine grace. These stories are not just random failures, they are deliberate cautionary tales woven into the fabric of the Arthurian world. Gawain's pride and Lionel's wrath represent the corrupting potential of the very virtues knights were meant to embody. Courage without humility becomes recklessness, and a passion for justice without mercy becomes a destructive force. Their individual shortcomings reflect a larger tragedy brewing within Camelot itself. The court's focus was shifting from spiritual service to earthly fame and rivalries, a slow decay that would ultimately lead to its downfall. The Grail quest acted as a divine litmus test, exposing these fractures long before they shattered the Round Table entirely. If the purest knights were destined to find the Grail, what does the failure of its bravest and most passionate warriors tell us about the true nature of this sacred hunt? If you had a map to the Grail castle, where would it lead? Its location is as elusive as the object it protects, a destination that shifts between the real and the mystical. One of the most enduring sights is Glastonbury Tor, that solitary hill rising from the Somerset levels in England. In legend, this was the ancient Isle of Avalon, the final resting place of King Arthur. Here, the Tor was seen as a portal to the otherworld, its terraced slopes resembling a spiral castle. It was at Glastonbury that Joseph of Arimathea was said to have founded his first church, and many believed he hid the Grail deep within a hidden chamber beneath the hill, guarded by a perpetual spiritual watch. Yet another tradition points to a mythical fortress named Corbenic, a castle that exists in a state of perpetual enchantment. Corbenic is not a place you can simply ride to, it reveals itself. Its walls shimmer in and out of sight, its location changing with the spiritual readiness of the seeker. For the pure-hearted Galahad, its gates swung open willingly, while the tormented Lancelot could only wander its outer forests, hearing its bells but never finding its door. This shifting nature is the entire point. The Grail Castle is not a fixed point in geography, but a state of being made manifest. It is a test in itself. A knight does not find the castle because he has traveled the correct roads, but because his own inner journey has prepared him to see it. The castle appears when the questing soul has been refined enough to perceive its reality. This is why its name changes, its location drifts, and its descriptions vary from story to story. It might be in Wales one day and in the Pyrenees the next, not because it moved, but because the consciousness required to find it is so rare. The search for a physical location is a beautiful distraction from the Grail's true challenge, which is an inward pilgrimage. The real castle was never made of stone, but of the virtues a knight had to build within himself. So the next time you look at a map, wondering where such a place could be, remember that the most important terrain you will ever cross is the landscape of your own heart. Centuries after the last knight hung up his shield, the Grail's call echoed through the smog-filled streets of the modern world. In 1922, the poet T.S. Eliot unleashed his monumental work, The Wasteland, a stark portrait of a civilization adrift. The poem's very title is a direct invocation of the Arthurian myth, a clear signal that the desolate kingdom of the Fisher King had not vanished, but had simply changed its form. Eliot's Wasteland is not a barren countryside of cracked earth, but a spiritual desert of crowded cities, meaningless routines, and fractured human connections. Its rivers are clogged with garbage, its people speak in hollow chatter, and a profound sense of emptiness haunts every line. This modern world, Eliot argues, is the new Grail Castle, and its inhabitants are all versions of the wounded king, suffering from a sickness of the soul they cannot name. The quest is no longer for a sacred cup, but for a single drop of meaning in an ocean of noise. The poem is a fragmented collage of voices and myths, mirroring the broken state of modern consciousness. Just as the medieval knight had to navigate magical forests and treacherous castles, Eliot's reader must navigate a labyrinth of literary allusions and cultural debris, searching for a unifying thread, a moment of redemptive grace. The Fisher King himself appears explicitly in the poem's final section, sitting on the shore fishing, surrounded by the ruins of a collapsed civilization. "What shall I do now? What shall I do?" he whispers. "I shall rush out as I am and walk the street with my hair down, so this is a king stripped of his majesty, his wound internalized as existential dread." The question that would heal him is no longer a simple query about a physical injury. but a desperate, unformed plea for purpose in a world that has lost its sacred center. Eliot suggests that the modern quest is even more difficult than the medieval one, for we no longer even believe in the Grail we are supposed to be seeking. Our failure is not a matter of forgetting to ask a question, but of forgetting that there is a question to be asked at all. How does a society begin to heal its spiritual blight when it no longer recognizes the symptoms of its own sickness? The Grail's journey through myth and poetry found an explosive new home in the 20th century, not in a dusty manuscript, but on the silver screen. In the blockbuster film Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the sacred mystery was reborn as a thrilling race against Nazis, transforming the spiritual quest into a heart-pounding adventure. Here, the Grail is not a jeweled chalice glowing with ethereal light, but a simple, humble cup of a carpenter, a plain wooden vessel that held the most powerful substance in the world. Its power is immediately tangible, offering eternal life to anyone who drinks from it, a direct and potent promise that reimagines the Grail as the ultimate prize in a global treasure hunt. Yet the film's genius lies in its final challenge, a test that perfectly captures the essence of the ancient legends. After navigating booby-trapped tunnels and solving ancient puzzles, Indiana Jones and his enemies reach the inner sanctum, a vast chamber where an ancient knight, kept alive for centuries by the Grail's power, guards a dazzling collection of golden, bejeweled cups. The villain, Walter Donovan, driven by greed and a desire for power, immediately seizes the most ornate and glorious chalice, certain that the greatest prize must look the part. He drinks, and in a horrifying moment, he ages centuries in seconds, crumbling to dust. The true test was never about finding the Grail, but about recognizing it. Jones, remembering the lesson that the Grail was the cup of a humble carpenter, bypasses the golden finery and chooses the plainest, most unassuming wooden cup. It is a choice that requires not knowledge, but faith and humility. When he drinks from it, the water is pure and life-giving, healing his mortal wound. This cinematic trial echoes the core of the medieval quests. It reiterates that divine grace cannot be seized by the proud or the powerful, but is bestowed upon those with the wisdom to see past worldly splendor and embrace true humility. The film translates a complex spiritual allegory into a visceral, unforgettable image, proving that even in an age of spectacle, the Grail's most enduring power lies in its demand for a quiet, selfless heart. How does this modern retelling, with its focus on a simple cup and a test of character, bring the ancient quest full circle, reminding us that the greatest treasures are often hidden in plain sight? But the Grail's mystery was never meant to be simple. As the 20th century dawned, the sacred cup underwent another radical transformation, shifting from a vessel of divine grace to a symbol of forbidden knowledge. This is the Gnostic Grail, a concept that suggests the true secret is not a cup at all, but hidden wisdom, a direct spiritual understanding, or gnosis, that the established church sought to suppress. In this provocative reinterpretation, the quest becomes a hunt for lost gospels and heretical truths. The Grail is no longer just a relic from the Last Supper, but a metaphor for a personal, unmediated connection to the divine, a knowledge so powerful it could shatter orthodox beliefs. This idea reached its peak of public fascination with a controversial book published in the 1980s, The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. Its authors proposed a breathtaking theory that the sangreal was not a holy object, but a sacred royal bloodline, the literal descendants of Jesus Christ himself. According to this narrative, Jesus survived the crucifixion, married Mary Magdalene, and fled to the south of France, where his lineage became the Merovingian dynasty of kings. The Knights Templar in this version were not just protectors of pilgrims, but the sworn guardians of this explosive secret, a bloodline that threatened the very foundation of the Vatican's authority. The book wove together historical fragments, medieval legends, and modern conspiracy into a compelling, if highly speculative, tapestry. It argued that the word sangreal was actually a coded phrase. Sangreal, meaning Holy Grail, could be read differently as sangreal, meaning royal blood. This single linguistic shift changes everything, turning a search for a cup into a hunt for a family. While mainstream historians have overwhelmingly dismissed the book's central claims as fiction, its impact on popular culture was undeniable. It tapped into a deep and enduring desire for alternative histories and hidden truths, reframing the Grail legend as the ultimate cover-up. Yet this separation of fact from fiction is precisely where the power of this modern quest lies. The historical evidence for a royal bloodline is virtually non-existent, but the cultural yearning it represents is profoundly real. The Gnostic Grail asks us a difficult question: are we seeking a physical object bestowed by God, or are we seeking a personal revelation that organized religion cannot provide? This version of the quest trades the angelic hosts for secret societies and the test of purity for a battle against institutional lies. It proves that the Grail is a mirror, reflecting whatever a generation fears or desires most, whether it is divine forgiveness, eternal life, or the liberating power of a truth they were never meant to know. This same alchemical yearning for perfection burns at the heart of the Grail quests. The Philosopher's Stone was the ultimate prize for the medieval alchemist, a substance said to perform two miracles, transmuting base lead into pure gold and granting the gift of immortal life. Yet this was never merely a recipe for physical chemistry. The true great work was always an inner transformation, a spiritual process where the lead of a flawed human soul was refined into the gold of an enlightened spirit. The Grail is that very stone, the ultimate symbol of esoteric wisdom made manifest. The parallels are precise and profound. The alchemist begins with the prima materia, a chaotic, base substance representing the unawakened soul. This is the Wasteland, the barren kingdom, and the wounded fisher king, a state of spiritual sickness and fragmentation. The long and arduous process of dissolution and purification, of burning away impurities in the alchemical furnace, mirrors the knight's journey through treacherous forests and his battles with inner demons. Each trial Sir Bors faced, every moment Lancelot spent paralyzed by his own sin, was a stage in this purification. The goal was the creation of the Lapis Philosophorum, the Philosopher's Stone, a perfect, incorruptible substance. This is the state achieved by Sir Galahad, whose soul was so perfectly refined that he could look into the Grail's depths and ascend to heaven. He did not find an object, he became the object of the quest. His base human nature was fully transmuted into spiritual gold, achieving the immortality not of the body, but of the soul united with the divine. The Grail, therefore, is not a cup you drink from, but a state of consciousness you become. It is the enlightened awareness that heals the inner fisher king and ends the personal wasteland of a life without meaning. This esoteric thread transforms the quest from a medieval adventure into a timeless, personal undertaking. The castle is your own mind, the wounded king is your own hidden pain, and the Grail is the luminous wisdom that awaits when you finally succeed in turning the lead of your struggles into gold. A secret order of warrior monks stands as one of history's most enduring guardians of the Grail mystery. The Knights Templar, founded in the 12th century to protect pilgrims on the roads to Jerusalem, would become the center of a sprawling legend that connected them inextricably to the sacred vessel. Their official mission was one of martial protection, but whispers soon began that their true purpose was far more profound. The theory suggests that during their long tenure in the Holy City, the Templars conducted secret excavations beneath the Temple Mount, the ruins of King Solomon's temple. It was there, in subterranean chambers untouched for centuries, that they unearthed a treasure beyond all imagining, not gold or jewels, but the Holy Grail itself. This incredible discovery, the story goes, transformed their order. They suddenly became impossibly wealthy and powerful, their influence stretching across Europe. Their rapid ascent was attributed not just to banking acumen, but to the possession of a divine relic that granted them wisdom and authority. The Grail became the source of their secret knowledge, an esoteric wisdom that set them apart from the established church. This legend paints their eventual persecution as a direct result of their guardianship. On Friday, October the 13th, 1307, King Philip IV of France, in collusion with Pope Clement V, moved to destroy the order, arresting its members on charges of heresy and blasphemy. The Templars were tortured, their Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was burned at the stake, and the order was dissolved. Yet in the popular imagination, this was not a simple power grab. It was an attempt to seize the Grail, to silence the knights who protected a truth too dangerous for the corridors of earthly power. The myth endures that before the arrests, the Templars smuggled their sacred charge away to safety, perhaps to Scotland or even across the sea, hiding it once more from a world not yet ready for its power. This version of the quest asks us to see the Grail not just as a spiritual test, but as a historical object fought over by kings and popes, a secret so potent it could build an empire or destroy it in a single day. The sacred drama of the Grail found its ultimate voice not in a dusty tome, but in a torrent of sublime sound. Richard Wagner's final opera, Perceval, elevates Wolfram von Eschenbach's epic into a profound meditation on redemption, where the very music becomes a vessel for the holy mystery. Wagner himself called it a sacred festival play, and from its first, hushed prelude, we are pulled into a world where sound paints the conflict between sacred and profane love. The orchestra whispers the themes of the Holy Grail, the Last Supper, and the desperate, aching wound of the Fisher King, here named Amfortas. His agony is not just physical, it is a spiritual crisis that resonates through every chord. He was wounded by his own sacred spear, a weapon stolen by the evil magician Klingsor, after Amfortas succumbed to the seductive charms of the enchantress Kundry. This is the central tragedy, a holy king brought low by a moment of earthly passion, his personal failing casting the Grail Brotherhood into a state of perpetual, sorrowful ritual. Into this world of suffering stumbles the fool, Perceval. He is pure innocence, a boy who knows nothing, not even his own name. He kills a sacred swan out of thoughtless instinct, and when he witnesses the magnificent Grail ceremony, he watches Amfortas torment with a detached curiosity. Just like his medieval counterpart, he fails to ask the healing question, but Wagner's genius is in how he charts the fool's transformation. Perceval's education comes through empathy. When Kundry, under Klingsor's command, presses a long, passionate kiss upon his lips, it does not seduce him. Instead, it unlocks a shattering understanding. In that moment, he feels the searing pain of Amfortas' wound within his own soul. He cries out, "Amfortas, the wound, I feel it burning in my own heart." This is the turning point. He is no longer an observer of suffering, he is a participant in it. His purity is now fused with compassion, and it is this union that makes him worthy. He resists Kundry's temptations and Klingsor's fury, reclaiming the holy spear that can alone heal the wound it inflicted. The music here is not merely accompaniment, it is the drama itself. The ethereal, shimmering tones of the Grail bells, the overwhelming crescendo of the transformation music as the simple forest becomes the Grail Hall, the aching, unresolved dissonances of Amfortas' pain, all work to bypass the intellect and speak directly to the soul. When Perceval finally returns, a matured and solemn knight, and touches the spear to Amfortas' side, the healing is not just physical, it is a moment of cosmic release, a resolution of musical and spiritual tension that feels less like a victory and more like a long-awaited homecoming. Wagner's Perceval suggests that true redemption is not found in avoiding temptation, but in understanding suffering so deeply that it becomes your own, and in using that shared pain to mend a broken world. The Sacred Cup's journey leads us inward, from the misty castles of medieval lore to the uncharted landscape of the human mind. The 20th century psychologist Carl Jung saw in the Grail quest not a historical relic hunt, but a powerful allegory for the most profound journey any person can undertake, the process of individuation. This is the lifelong work of becoming a whole, integrated self by reconciling the conscious mind with the vast, often hidden, territories of the unconscious. In this psychological reading, the Grail is the symbol of the self, the central, unified core of our being that emerges when all our conflicting parts are finally brought into harmony. The quest is our own inner pilgrimage toward that wholeness. The knights who ride out from Camelot are not separate warriors, but facets of a single psyche embarking on this difficult path. Sir Galahad represents the spiritual ideal, the drive for perfection. Sir Lancelot embodies the shadow, the passionate and often forbidden desires that conflict with our conscious values. And Perceval is the naive ego, the part of us that begins the journey unaware of the depths we must explore. Their adventures in the external world mirror the internal struggles we all face as we confront the unknown within ourselves. The dark forests and treacherous bridges are the anxieties and defenses we must cross. The magical creatures and daunting enemies are the archetypal figures that rise from the unconscious, challenging us to grow. But what is the wound that sets this entire epic in motion? The Fisher King's grievous injury is a perfect symbol for a deep, unhealed psychological trauma. This is not a simple physical hurt, but a core wound to the psyche, often rooted in childhood or a profound personal loss that has festered and crippled the king's ability to live fully. His suffering and the resulting wasteland represent a life lived in a state of fragmentation. When a part of us is wounded and locked away in the unconscious, the entire personality suffers. Creativity dries up, relationships become barren, and a sense of emptiness, the psychological wasteland, dominates our experience. The king cannot heal himself because the conscious ego is cut off from the transformative powers of the unconscious. The healing question, the simple act of asking, "What ails you?" is the crucial moment of awareness. It represents the ego's courageous decision to turn toward the wounded part of the self, to acknowledge its pain and bring it into the light of consciousness. This act of compassionate inquiry is the beginning of integration. For Perceval, the question healed the king. For us, it is the moment we stop running from our pain and finally choose to understand it. The Grail, then, is the state of wholeness we achieve when we successfully integrate these disparate parts. It is not a distant prize, but the inner peace and vitality that floods our lives when the wound is accepted and the war within ceases. The quest's ultimate goal is to become the guardian of your own Grail, to sit as the healed king of your own once desolate inner kingdom. Yet the vessel of divine grace has always been borne by feminine hands. For centuries, the focus has been on the knights who sought the Grail, while the women who guarded its very essence remained in the shadows. A feminist reading of the myth pulls these figures into the light, revealing that the quest's success often hinged not on masculine strength, but on feminine wisdom and power. Consider the Grail bearer herself, the silent maiden who carries the sacred vessel in the castle procession. She is not a passive ornament, but an active priestess of the mystery. Her purity is not a sign of weakness, but a source of authority, the necessary quality that allows her to handle the divine without being consumed by it. She presents the Grail to the knight, a moment of transmission where her action enables his vision. Without her, there is no Grail to be seen. Then there is Dindrain, the sister of Perceval, a character of profound and tragic virtue. In the French romances, her role is sacrificial and deeply symbolic. When Perceval and Galahad need a specific relic to cross a treacherous river, it is Dindrain who provides it, offering her own hair to weave a magical belt and later giving her own blood to heal a sick woman. Her body literally becomes the instrument of the quest's advancement, a stark illustration of how female life-giving power has always sustained the spiritual journeys of men. Her ultimate fate, giving her life so others may live, frames her not as a victim, but as a Christ-like figure whose compassion enables redemption, and we cannot forget Blanchefleur, Perceval's beloved. She is the reason he first learns the meaning of chivalric love and protection. When he saves her city from siege, he is not just winning a battle, he is learning to connect his martial skill to a cause beyond his own glory. She represents the earthly, human love that is a necessary step on the path toward divine love. These women form a triad of feminine influence, the bearer, the sacrificer, and the inspirer, each essential to the knight's transformation. Beyond these characters, the Grail itself is a profoundly feminine symbol. It is a vessel, a cup, a receptacle. It does not act, it receives and contains. It is the womb of divine grace, the source of spiritual nourishment in life. In a world dominated by the phallic symbolism of swords and lances, the Grail stands as a powerful counterpoint, a reminder that the ultimate mystery is not about piercing and conquering, but about opening and receiving. The quest then becomes a balancing act. The knight must integrate his masculine, active striving with this receptive, feminine principle. He must learn to be still, to listen, to ask the compassionate question, to become, in a sense, a vessel himself. When he does, the feminine guardians of the Grail, from the silent bearer to the sacrificing sister, recognize his wholeness and allow him to complete the journey. What does it mean that our most enduring legend of divine pursuit is secretly guided by the very feminine power the stories so often seem to overlook? Yet our longing for the Grail is so powerful that we cannot help but search for it in the real world. This is the quest for the historical Grail, a hunt for a physical object that can be held in your hands, a sacred cup with a provenance stretching back 2,000 years. Among the most famous candidates is the Antioch chalice, a stunning silver and gilt vessel discovered in the early 20th century. When it was first unveiled, the world held its breath. The ornate outer cage of grapevines and figures seemed to tell a Christian story, and its size suggested it was a liturgical chalice. For a thrilling moment, it was proclaimed as the Holy Grail itself, the very cup of Christ. But closer scholarly examination revealed a more complicated truth. The chalice is now generally dated to the 6th century, a beautiful but later piece of ecclesiastical art. It was not the cup of the Last Supper, but a lamp or a standing vessel, its true story fascinating in its own right, yet separate from the legendary Grail. Then there is the Valencia chalice, a far more compelling claimant. Housed in the Cathedral of Valencia, Spain, this simple, elegant cup carved from dark red agate feels ancient and humble. Its design is consistent with the type of stone vessel used in the Holy Land during the time of Jesus. Tradition holds that it was used by the popes of the early church before being taken to Spain for safekeeping. It even has a documented history that places it in the monastery of San Juan de la Peña by the 14th century. Standing before it, you can feel the weight of its possibility. It looks the part, it feels the part, and its journey through history is partially documented, but here we reach the inevitable wall that every historical quest faces, the absolute lack of concrete archaeological evidence. There is no chain of custody that leads directly from the upper room in Jerusalem to a cathedral in Spain. There is no inscription, no undisputed record that confirms this agate cup was the one held by Jesus. The evidence is circumstantial, bolstered by faith and tradition, not by empirical proof. This is the core of the dilemma. The Grail is a legend, a spiritual symbol that took shape in the medieval imagination centuries after the events it describes. The historical search is a beautiful, human endeavor to touch the divine, to make the metaphor real, but in the end, the very nature of the Grail defies such possession. It was never meant to be catalogued in a museum or its authenticity proven by carbon dating. Its power lies in its eternal elusiveness, in the way it calls us not to a dusty relic, but to a journey of the spirit. So, what are we truly seeking when we look at an ancient cup behind glass? Is it the object itself, or the echo of a story that promises to make us whole? A knight's destiny was often written before he ever drew a sword. The quest for the Grail was not a random adventure, but a path foretold, woven into the very fabric of Arthurian legend by the threads of prophecy. The great enchanter Merlin himself spoke of a time when a sacred vessel would appear, a sign that the world was ready for a divine test. His vision set the stage, creating an atmosphere of expectation that hung over Camelot like a coming storm. But the most chilling and specific prophecy was carved in stone, literally, upon the Siege Perilous. That empty seat at the Round Table was not just enchanted, it was inscribed. Ancient letters, invisible to all, promised that this seat would remain vacant until the one perfect knight, the one chosen by fate, arrived to claim it. The moment Sir Galahad walked into the hall and those letters blazed forth with his name, his entire journey was sealed. He did not choose the Grail quest, it chose him. This intertwining of fate and free will creates the central tension of every knight's story. Were they merely actors playing out a script written by the stars, or did their own choices truly matter? For Galahad, his purity aligned so perfectly with the prophecy that his will and his destiny became one. He moved through the quest with the inevitability of a river flowing to the sea. But for others like Perceval, the prophecy was a backdrop against which his own flawed humanity played out. He was destined to encounter the Grail, that much was foretold, but his failure to ask the healing question was a moment of pure, agonizing free will. His destiny brought him to the castle, but his own silence locked the door. The prophecy set the stage, but the knight still had to deliver the lines. This duality is what gives the legends their enduring power. We see a world where a higher plan is at work, yet every individual must still find the courage within themselves to fulfill their part in it. The quest was a dance between a divine script and the human heart's unpredictable rhythm. So, does a prophecy rob us of our choices, or does it simply reveal the person we were always meant to become? The world could not hold such a perfect vessel forever. With Sir Galahad's final prayer, his soul ascending to heaven in a blaze of light, the Holy Grail's purpose in the mortal realm was fulfilled. The sacred cup, which had sustained the land through its guardian for so long, began to lose its tangible presence. It did not shatter or vanish in an instant, but its radiance grew dimmer. Its appearances to the faithful became fleeting visions, until one day it was simply gone, withdrawn from the earthly plane and returned to the celestial spheres from which it came. This was not a theft or a loss, but a quiet, solemn recall. The age of direct miracles was over. The Grail's departure was a spiritual cataclysm for the island of Britain. It was as if a vital cord connecting the land to the divine had been severed. The lingering blessing that had fueled the prosperity of Arthur's reign began to ebb away. The fields, once so fertile, now yielded smaller harvests. The air itself seemed to grow colder, the mists thicker. A profound melancholy settled over the kingdom, a collective intuition that a glorious chapter was closing. The withdrawal of the Grail's grace was the first and most fatal crack in the foundation of Camelot. Without its unifying, sacred purpose, the ambitions of the knights turned inward. The quest for personal glory and vengeance began to eclipse the ideals of the Round Table. The Grail had been the ultimate symbol of a higher calling. a reminder that their strength served something greater than themselves. Once it was gone, the rivalries and flaws it had once exposed festered into open conflict. The noble fellowship started to unravel, its bonds weakened by suspicion and pride. The departure of the Grail foreshadowed the coming darkness, the tragic civil war between Arthur and Mordred that would leave the kingdom a wasteland in truth, littered with the bodies of its greatest heroes. Why would a symbol of divine grace abandon the world that needed it most? Its presence was always conditional, a gift that required a worthy vessel. When the one perfect knight was gone, and the court proved it could not sustain the virtue the quest had demanded, the age of miracles ended. The Grail's absence asks a haunting question of us all: what happens when a society loses its connection to the sacred, when the highest ideals simply vanish from the world, leaving only the echo of their memory behind? The hero's journey is a story we have all lived before, a call to adventure echoes from a world beyond the familiar. A reluctant hero crosses a threshold into the unknown, and after trials and temptations, they seize a priceless boon and return to heal their community. This narrative arc, identified by mythologist Joseph Campbell as the monomyth, is the hidden skeleton of the Grail quest, a structure so powerful it has become the bedrock of modern storytelling. Think of the humble farm boy Luke Skywalker gazing at the twin sons of Tatooine. His call is not a vision of a golden cup, but a desperate hologram from a princess, a plea that pulls him from his ordinary world. The wise old hermit Obi-Wan Kenobi replaces the wise hermit Trevisant, guiding him toward a mystical energy, the Force, which is as elusive and all-powerful as the Grail itself. The journey to rescue the princess and destroy the Death Star is his path to the Grail Castle, a quest for a goal that will restore freedom to a galaxy oppressed, lifting a cosmic wasteland. The Grail is not always a physical object. In the film The Matrix, it is the profound knowledge that one person, the One, can reshape a false reality. Neo's entire journey, from his call to adventure with the message to follow the White Rabbit, to his training with Morpheus, and his ultimate confrontation with Agent Smith, mirrors the stages of the Grail quest. He is the knight tested, the chosen one who must believe in his own worth to achieve the ultimate prize, which is not a cup, but the power to see the truth and liberate humanity from its slumber. Even the search for a simple, physical object in stories like Indiana Jones or The Lord of the Rings follows this sacred pattern. The quest for the One Ring, while a burden, is a dark inversion of the Grail quest, where the ultimate goal is not to possess the object, but to destroy it, to heal a Middle-earth blighted by the shadow of Sauron. In every case, the core elements remain: a wounded world, a call to a seemingly ordinary person, a path of terrible trials, and a final, transformative act that holds the power to make everything whole. Why does this particular story feel so instinctively right to us, resonating across cultures and centuries? It is because the Grail quest is not just a plot, it is a map of the human soul's own potential for growth, a promise that within each of us lies the capacity to answer a call, face our demons, and bring back a gift that can change our world. Our own world is now the Fisher King's domain, a living kingdom suffering from a deep and festering wound. The modern wasteland is not a mythic blight, but a scientific reality seen in the bleaching of coral reefs, the silent stretches of clear-cut forests, and the rising heat of our own atmosphere. This is the Grail quest for our time, a search not for a sacred cup, but for the wisdom and will to heal our planet. The question we must learn to ask is no longer directed at a single ailing king, but at our entire global community and the systems we have built. What ails us, and how do we restore the balance? The knights of this new quest are not armored warriors, but scientists, activists, engineers, and communities working to mend the earth. Their Holy Grail is a sustainable future, a way of living that does not consume the world but renews it, This might take the form of a revolutionary technology that cleans our oceans, a policy that protects vast wildlands, or a simple shift in our daily habits that collectively reverses the tide of waste. The castle we must find is not a hidden fortress, but a new state of collective consciousness, a place where we finally understand that the health of the king and the health of the land are one and the same. Our personal choices, our industrial systems, and the vitality of the natural world are linked in a sacred bond. The tragedy of the original myth was the knight's silence, his failure to ask the healing question out of a misplaced sense of propriety. Our parallel failure is a silence born of apathy, distraction, or the feeling that the problem is too vast for any one person to confront, yet the legend's hope lies in its second chance. Perceval, humbled by his initial failure, returns to ask the question that saves the kingdom. We too are being given a second chance, a narrow window in which to pose our own difficult questions and take decisive, compassionate action. The quest for the environmental grail is the most urgent pilgrimage we can undertake, a call to transform our wounded world from a wasteland back into a garden. Your own deepest longing is a compass pointing toward your personal grail. This is not a cup to be found in a castle, but the life you are meant to live, the person you are meant to become. The quest is no longer a medieval fantasy, but the daily, quiet heroism of seeking purpose, wholeness, or a creative calling. Your grail might be the profound peace of mending a broken relationship, the fulfillment of building something meaningful with your hands, or the simple, steady joy of a life lived in alignment with your truest values. It is whatever represents your highest ideal, the thing that, if achieved, would make your inner wasteland bloom. The journey toward it is fraught with its own modern perils. The dark forest is not made of trees, but of doubt and distraction, the endless noise of daily obligations that lure you away from your true path. The treacherous knights you must face are not armored warriors, but your own inner demons of fear, procrastination, and the crippling belief that you are not worthy of such a prize. Your Fisher King is that wounded part of you, the old hurt or limiting story that holds you back, casting a shadow over your potential and leaving your inner landscape feeling barren. The castle you seek is not a physical location, but a state of mind, a moment of clarity where you finally understand what you must do, and the healing question is not asked of a king, but of yourself. What wound am I refusing to acknowledge? What step have I been too afraid to take? The courage to ask that question, to look inward with radical honesty, is the first and most vital act of your quest. You are both the knight and the wounded king, the seeker and the one who must be healed. Your journey will be unique, mapped not by the stars, but by the choices you make each day. The challenges you overcome are not recorded in epic poems, but in the quiet victories over your own limitations. So, what is the sacred vessel you are searching for, and what is the one question you have been too silent to ask? Perhaps the most compelling proof of the Grail's power is that its story refuses to end. For over 800 years, this legend has been reshaped, reinterpreted, and reimagined, yet its core mystery remains untouched, a wellspring of inspiration that never runs dry. It possesses a unique alchemy, a perfect blend of high adventure and deep spirituality. It offers the thrill of the hunt, the knight riding through a dark forest, the hidden castle guarded by enchantment. Yet it simultaneously promises a profound spiritual reward, a chance to touch the divine and heal a broken world. This dual appeal means it can be a simple treasure hunt in one telling and a complex allegory for psychological wholeness in the next. It satisfies our craving for both external action and internal transformation, but the true engine of its endurance is its ultimate unsolvability. The Grail can be a cup, a stone, a bloodline, or a state of consciousness because it was never meant to be defined. Its nature shifts to reflect the deepest questions of the age asking it. A medieval society concerned with sin and salvation saw a Christian chalice. A modern world skeptical of institutions sees a suppressed secret. A psychologically aware era sees a symbol of the integrated self. Each generation finds its own wound in the Fisher King and its own quest in the knight's journey. This eternal elusiveness is what keeps the story alive. If the Grail were ever truly found, if one theory were proven beyond doubt, the myth would collapse into a simple historical fact, losing its magic. Its power lies in the seeking, not the finding. It lives in the space between the question and the answer, in the perpetual call to adventure that resonates in every human heart. Why does this particular story continue to capture us? Because the Grail is a mirror. We see in its shimmering surface not a single truth, but the reflection of our own endless longing for meaning, for healing, for something sacred to seek in a world that often feels like a wasteland. The quest is never over because we are always asking the question. The parchment pages of medieval scribes were only the beginning. From Chrétien de Troyes' unfinished poem to the vast cycles of the Lancelot Grail, the story was never static. Monks meticulously copied and expanded the tales, adding the sacred history of Joseph of Arimathea and the spiritual trials of the Quest del Saint Graal. Each new manuscript was not merely a copy, but a reinterpretation, bending the legend to emphasize the religious or chivalric ideals most precious to its time. This process of creative adaptation never truly stopped. It simply found new mediums. The invention of the printing press carried the story from monastic scriptoria into the hands of a wider public, preserving the Arthurian world just as the Age of Knights was fading into history. The Grail had survived its first great transition, proving its narrative power was not bound to any single form. It was ready for the modern world. Centuries later, the Romantic poets of the 19th century would rediscover the legend, not as a religious text, but as a source of national identity and sublime mystery. Alfred, Lord Tennyson's Idylls of the King, reframed the quest for a Victorian audience, focusing on the tragic decay of Camelot and presenting the Grail as an almost unreachable ideal that highlighted human frailty. This shift from divine relic to psychological symbol opened the door for the 20th century, where the Grail would find its most explosive new life in cinema. Films like John Boorman's Excalibur presented the Grail as a radiant, life-giving force essential to the land's health, a visual spectacle that captured its mystical essence for a mass audience. Then came Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which masterfully transformed the spiritual pilgrimage into a globe-trotting adventure, making the final test a choice of humility over pride. Each film used the language of its genre to ask the same eternal question, but the answer was tailored to the hopes and fears of a new generation. Today, the quest continues in the interactive realms of video games. In titles like the Dark Souls series, the player literally becomes the knight, wandering a desolate and punishing landscape that is the very definition of a modern wasteland. The Grail is not a single object, but the elusive goal of overcoming impossible challenges and uncovering a fractured world's hidden lore. Here, the focus is on personal perseverance and the player's own journey, a reflection of our contemporary emphasis on individual struggle and agency. From the pages of a hand-copied book to the immersive glow of a screen, the Grail's story evolves because we need it to. It serves as a cultural mirror, reflecting our changing values. A medieval society concerned with salvation saw a holy chalice. A modern society skeptical of institutions sees a cover-up or a bloodline. An anxious, digital generation sees a broken world that can only be healed through direct, personal action. The legend's true magic is its endless adaptability, its ability to become whatever we are searching for at the time. Why does this particular story have the unique power to reinvent itself for every new medium and every new century? always feeling both ancient and urgently new. So many nights, so many quests, yet the Grail remains a single, shifting beacon. We have ridden alongside 30 legendary seekers, from the pure Galahad, whose heart was so clean it drew the divine to him, to the flawed Perceval, who found his grace only after learning to feel another's pain. We have seen the Grail as a stone of heaven, a royal bloodline, a psychological key, and a call to heal our wounded planet. It has been a nightly test, an alchemical process, and a mirror for our own deepest longings. This endless transformation is the proof of its power. The Grail is not one thing, but every answer to a question we are always asking. It is the ultimate symbol of our eternal search for something greater than ourselves, a purpose that makes the wasteland bloom, a wholeness that mends our inner fractures, a touch of the sacred in a world hungry for meaning. Your own journey is part of this unending story. The Grail you seek is as unique as your own spirit. So now, we pass the question to you. After this journey through the mists of legend, what does the Grail mean in your life? Share your quest in the comments below.